Quiet Island. Prologue. Echoes of the past. That day was scorched and clear. 15 years ago, but Artyom remembered every second as if it had happened yesterday. They were children then, 6 inseparable friends, warming themselves on the banks of an old river near their provincial town. The air shimmered with heat, smelling of warm pine needles and water. "Can you swim to that beat?" Dima, the most adventurous of them, pointed at a small island looming in the middle of the river. It was small, overgrown with stunted fir trees. "It's deep there, the current will pull you in," Artyom muttered. But Dima was already taking off his t-shirt. "Coward!" he shouted, laughing, and ran to the water. They watched his tanned back flash in the turquoise water. He swam easily, powerfully, almost there. And then he disappeared. Not with a cry, not with a splash, as if someone had grabbed his leg and pulled him sharply downward. Silence. Then panic. Screams. The splash of water. They rushed after him, diving until their muscles cramped. But the river gave them neither bodies nor even a bubble of air as a farewell. From then on, their group was down one person, and a cold, sticky feeling of guilt settled in the souls of those who remained. They nicknamed the island Burakov, and no one dared even look in its direction anymore. Chapter 1. Return to the river. The UAZ Patriot, with a boat attached, rumbled loudly as it pulled onto the dirt road leading to the dock. The interior smelled of gasoline, rubber, and the anticipation of freedom. The 6 adults, all in their 30s, felt almost like teenagers. "So, team, are you ready for great things?" Artyom, sitting behind the wheel, glanced in the rearview mirror. His gaze was intense. This trip was his idea, his attempt to mend the broken pieces of their friendship. "Achievements. I'm ready for a barbecue and a week without hearing the city noise," Oleg drawled phlegmatically, fiddling with the settings of his new drone. "By the way, from this angle, Artyom, your bald head looks very majestic. A real rock." Lisa smiled, looking out the window at the endless walls of the taiga passing by. Her fingers unconsciously flicked through her sketchbook. She was already mentally sketching these landscapes. Dark, majestic, full of hidden power. "Just no extreme sports, okay?" Ivan said, adjusting his glasses. "As a doctor, I'm responsible for your physical health. And as a friend, for your mental health. No swims on a dare." Artyom's gaze darted to the mirror again, catching Sergei's eye. He was silently staring out his window, clutching a plastic cup filled with something strong. The memory of Dima hovered in the car like an invisible 7th passenger. Marina, filming everything on her phone for her blog, commented in a whisper. Day 1. A group of desperate adventurers, or simply losers fleeing debt and deadlines, sets off into the wilderness. We'll see what comes of it. The boat's launch took place with the usual Russian swearing and banter. Soon, the motorboat was cutting through the mirror-like surface of the river, leaving a foamy trail in its wake. The air was clean and fresh, the sun was warm. But in the shade of the centuries-old cedars along the banks, a coolness was already noticeable. "It's so beautiful," Lisa exhaled, running her hand into the cool stream of water overboard. "It really washes my soul away." "It'll wash it off. It'll wash it off," Sergei muttered. "I just hope it doesn't start raining. I can feel it. It's making my bones ache." They sailed for several hours, admiring the harsh Siberian landscape. The shores were almost uninhabited, with only the occasional abandoned hut or sign of a long-forgotten logging operation. It was Oleg who noticed him first. "Hey people, look," He pointed forward and slightly to the side. Our old friend, Burakov. Everyone fell silent. The very island that had once been a mere swimming destination for them, then a monument to their eternal guilt, slowly passed by on their starboard side. It was larger than they remembered. Not a small island, but a patch of land, covered in dense, almost black forest, stretching for several hundred meters. "Let's sail past," Artem said quietly, increasing the engine speed. "Wait!" Marina shouted. "Look! What's there?" Against the dark greenery at the water's edge, an unnatural outline was visible. Straight, geometric, man-made. "It's a house," Lisa whispered. Her fingers instinctively reached for the pencil. "A big house." "That can't be," Ivan objected. "Who would build such a mansion on a desert island? What nonsense." "Let's check it out." Oleg was already launching his drone. Reconnaissance in force. The drone took off with a whirring sound. Everyone held their breath, watching the tablet screen in his hands. The camera flew over the treetops, and the sight that greeted them left even the skeptical Marina speechless. Amidst an overgrown park that had long since gone wild, stood a huge two-story house. Wooden, blackened by time and moisture, with empty window sockets and a roof crumbling in places, it exuded a sense of oblivion and melancholy. But that wasn't the strangest thing about it. Surprisingly, there were patches of well-tended land around the house, reminiscent of vegetable gardens. And near the old, dilapidated pier, the outline of an old boat could be discerned. "Wow," Oleg exhaled. "It's a real ghost town. Guys, we have to film this. This is guaranteed to be a hit on my blog," Marina exclaimed. "This is madness," Ivan said sharply. "It's an abandoned building, probably in disrepair. There's no sign of any utilities anywhere. It's the worst idea you could come up with." "What if someone lives there?" Lisa interjected. "Look, the ground's been dug up. Some kind of hermits," Sergei snorted. "Man-eating bears." "Just for half an hour," Artem said unexpectedly. His face was pale. "We'll quickly take the boat to the pier, have a look around, maybe even peek in the window. That's all. We need to do this." He didn't say why, but everyone understood. It was their unspoken duty. A duty to the memory of Dima, who never made it to this island. The argument died down. The decision was made. Artyom turned the boat around and headed toward the ominous, silent island. The pier had rotted so much that they were afraid to set foot on it. They tied the boat to a surviving pile. The air here was different, thick, damp, and still. The distant sounds of the taiga didn't reach here. An oppressive silence reigned. "Ugh, it smells in here," Oleg grimaced. "It's quiet and it smells. Like a crypt." "Stop it," Sergei muttered, but he too was looking around nervously. They set off along the overgrown path toward the house. Lisa walked, feeling goosebumps on her back. She felt as if they were being watched from the thicket. Deep in the shadows between the tree trunks, she thought she saw a flicker of something pale and humanoid. She turned around abruptly. Nothing. Up close, the house was even more imposing and gloomy. The carved door frames, once beautiful, were now peeling and covered in cobwebs. The porch had sagged. A strange find lay on the threshold, a rusty cartridge case, clearly modern. "Someone was here before us," Ivan stated, picking up the shell casing. "Hunters, probably," Artem suggested. but there was uncertainty in his voice. Meanwhile, Marina was filming everything. Here we are, friends, a house forgotten by time. I wonder what secrets it holds. Oleg launched a drone to survey the house from above. From a bird's-eye view, it was clear that the house stood in the center of a clearing, and beyond, inland, a dense, impenetrable forest began. At the edge of this forest, the drone spotted several dark, low objects, resembling bunkers or barracks.
Guys,
Oleg's voice wavered. It looks like this isn't just a manor. It looks like some old camp. At that moment, a sharp screeching sound came from the tablet's speaker. The screen filled with static, and the connection with the drone was interrupted. Damn! What happened? Oleg screamed, shaking the equipment. From the depths of the forest, right where the bunkers had been seen, a sound came. It was quiet but distinct, like someone dragging an iron chain slowly and heavily across the ground. Everyone froze, peering into the green haze, and then Lisa screamed and dropped her sketchbook. She was looking at one of the dark second-floor windows. There's someone there, she whispered breathlessly. I saw a face. Artyom looked up at the empty blackness of the window. Nothing. It seemed so. Let's get out of here. But it was too late. Behind them, from the direction of the pier, came a loud, single thud. It was as if a huge sledgehammer had struck the hull of their boat. They ran back to the water. The boat was still there, but a huge hole gaped in its side, as if it had been rammed with a log. And all around in the wet ground they saw footprints. Many footprints. Barefoot, human, but with unnaturally long toes and heels pressed deep into the mud. The tracks led into the forest. They were trapped. Chapter 2. The House That Breathes. The second that followed was deafening silence, more terrifying than any scream. They froze at the pier, staring at the green wall of the taiga, where the same scraping sound had come from. The tracks in the damp earth seemed fresh and sticky. They spread out in different directions, forming a semicircle around them. Is it a bear? Marina whispered, faint hope in her voice, still clutching her phone in her trembling fingers. The camera was off. Her instinct for self-preservation overcame her thirst for content. On 2 legs? With feet like that? Ivan crouched down, trying not to touch the footprints. He ran his hand over the print, feeling the unnatural chill emanating from the ground. It's a human foot, but deformed. Badly. Looks like the marks of a leper, Sergei said gloomily. He'd already pulled a folding knife from his backpack, the blade glinting in the slanting rays of the setting sun. Or someone who hasn't worn shoes in a while. Artyom approached the boat. The hole was the size of a fist, jagged edges, pointing inward. Not a blow, but a blow from the outside. Something huge and heavy had broken through the hull in one attempt. The repair kit won't help, he stated, and for the first time, open panic was evident in his voice. Someone wasn't expecting us here. A drone, Oleg remembered. Maybe it just fell? The battery died? He launched the app again, poked at the buttons, and shook the tablet. The screen was a gray one with the words, "No signal," written on it. He didn't fall. Something happened to him. It was like He was muffled. The wind, which hadn't been there a moment ago, suddenly rustled the leaves, bringing them a new sound. Not a chain, a muffled, wet scraping, like someone sharpening a knife on a large stone. Somewhere very close. "Into the house," Artem commanded sharply. "Right now. This is the only shelter." No one argued. The forest, which had recently seemed majestic and tranquil, now breathed menace. Every tree could conceal an unknown danger. The house, though ominous, was man-made. It had walls and a door. They ran along the trail, leaving behind the mangled boat and the grisly tracks. Their backs burned with the anticipation of the blow, the touch of someone's icy hands. Lisa, running last, turned around. At the edge of the forest, 10 meters from the trail, she saw him again. The same pale face in the second-story window. Only now he wasn't just looking. He was smiling. A wide, unnatural smile, reaching almost to his ears. She didn't say a word. She just quickened her pace. The door to the house, a massive, cracked oak door, was locked. Without thinking, Sergei leaned his shoulder against it, but the door didn't even budge. "Wait, barbarian." Oleg pushed him aside and reached into his backpack marked "Emergency Supplies." A moment later, he pulled out a powerful flashlight and a set of lockpicks. "What? I was into it as a kid. It's a hobby." "You never cease to amaze me." Ivan shook his head, while Oleg, with a concentrated look, began to fiddle with the lock. The click sounded deafeningly loud in the oppressive silence. The door creaked, as if reluctantly, inward. They were greeted by a smell, a complex, multi-layered cocktail. Dust, mold, rotten wood, and underneath it all, a sweet, cloying odor reminiscent of rotten meat and formaldehyde. They entered a spacious hall. The beams of the lanterns, flickering in the gathering dusk, picked out details from the gloom. High ceilings, decorated with moldings, some of which had fallen and lay in chunks on the floor. A massive oak staircase led to the second floor. Peeling wallpaper covered the walls, and here and there dark stains were visible, the shape of which they were afraid to examine. "What a mansion," Oleg whistled. "Like we've ended up visiting some landowner, only the landowner seemed to be a cannibal." "Everyone in their places," Artem ordered, locking the door with the bolt. He pulled it, and the heavy iron rods slammed into the bracket with a reassuring clang. "Vanya, Oleg, the first-floor windows." "Sergei, help them barricade themselves with something." "Marina, Lisa, check the surrounding rooms but don't leave their line of sight." They bustled about, moving old, cobwebbed furniture, dressers, tables, heavy chairs, towards the windows and secondary doors. Lisa, trembling, approached one of the living room windows. Through the dirty glass, a patch of park and the beginning of a path leading to the forest were visible. Nothing, absolutely nothing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched closely from the other side. Marina, overcoming her revulsion, filmed on her phone. Her voice was muffled, lacking the usual blogger vivacity. "We're inside. The house is old, very old, and it doesn't seem empty. The air is heavy, it's hard to breathe. We've barricaded the entrance." "Found something," Ivan called from the next room, which, judging by the remains of furniture, was an office. They gathered around him. On the massive desk, Covered in dust lay a tattered leather folder. Ivan carefully opened it. Inside were yellowed sheets of paper, covered in neat, old-fashioned handwriting. And a photograph. The photograph showed a man in his 50s wearing thin, wire-rimmed glasses, a neatly trimmed beard, and a piercing, intelligent gaze. He stood against the backdrop of this very house. Only, then it looked new and well-kept. Beside him were several men in overalls, their expressions blank and devastated. On the back of the photograph was a note in ink. Dr. Gross, Personnel and Subjects, Pacific Island, 1952. Gulag, Artyom whispered, taking the photo. So Oleg was right. It was a camp. Guinea pigs? Marina recoiled in disgust. What did he do with them? Ivan carefully unfolded one of the sheets of paper. It was a page from a diary. November 3rd. A new batch has arrived. 10 units. Condition satisfactory. Physical labor has already weakened them considerably, their spirits broken. Ideal material for the first injections. The Prometheus 1 drug is showing instability. 7 units died within 24 hours. 3 remain. Motor functions are impaired, but basic instincts are preserved. In fact, they are even heightened. Hunger, that's the key. Hunger and pain. A deathly silence fell over the room. Someone's breath could be heard catching. He experimented on people, Ivan said, his voice, always so calm, trembling. Created zombies? In the 50s? Not a zombie, Lisa said quietly. She stood by the window, looking out at the darkening park. Not just a zombie. He wrote that the spirit is broken. He wasn't just working with the body, he was putting something into them. Suddenly, a sound came from the upper floor. A dull, heavy thud, as if something large and soft had fallen to the floor. Everyone shuddered and raised their heads. "It's up there," Sergei exhaled, clutching the knife. "No one's going up there," Artyom said sternly. "We're holding the line here. Night is coming. We'll figure out what to do in the morning." "What if they're already here?" Marina asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "In the house?" The twilight deepened, turning into true darkness. They barricaded themselves in the study, the smallest and most secure room on the ground floor. The furniture was pushed tightly against the only door. The window facing the side of the house was covered with a bookshelf removed from the wall. Oleg, using a power bank, connected headphones to his tablet and tried to get any kind of signal. No luck. The airwaves were empty. Quiet Island lived up to its name. Ivan shuffled through the pages of Dr. Gross's file, reading excerpts aloud. Each entry was a chilling confession of a sadist masquerading as science. November 17th. Unit number 5 is showing signs of aggression, directed not at food, but at other test subjects. Interesting. Social hierarchy built on fear persists even after clinical death. The drug Prometheus 3 should enhance this effect. I've erased the personality, but I can't erase the body's memory. The memory of pain. Memory, Lisa repeated, wrapping herself in an old blanket she'd found in the closet. She sat pressed against the wall, staring into space. They remember what was done to them. They remember the pain. "Stop it, Lisa," Artyom said wearily. "You're just making things worse." "She's right," Sergei suddenly supported her. He was sitting in the corner, the bottle of moonshine in his hands already half empty. I can feel them. They're angry, very angry, and hungry. But not for food. They need company. He laughed hollowly, and his laugh was terrible. Suddenly, Oleg pulled off his headphones. Guys, I picked up a signal. It's weak, fragmented, but it's not broadcast. It's a drone transmission. Everyone perked up. What? Where is he? What do you hear? Nothing, almost nothing, static, but he put his finger to his lips, silencing everyone, and turned on speakerphone. A hissing, intermittent sound came from the tablet's speaker. Among the static, rustling sounds, creaking sounds, and a quiet, monotonous voice. A child's voice, humming an old nursery rhyme. The moon emerged from the fog and took a knife out of its pocket. I will cut. I will beat. You still have to love. Lisa's breath caught. She recognized that voice. They all recognized it. It was Dima's voice. That's what he'd been like at 15. It's him, Sergei whispered. His eyes widened, wild lights dancing in them. He's here. He's on the island. Sergei, no, it's a trap, Artem shouted, but it was too late. Sergei jumped up, threw the bottle away, and before anyone could react, he pushed aside the barricade at the door and ran out into the dark hall. Seryoga, come back, Ivan shouted. A new sound came from the tablet, heavy, raspy breathing, directly into the drone's microphone. And the same child's voice, but now it was very close, a whisper full of cold mockery. Seryoga, come to us. We're here, in the forest. Then there was a deafening blow, the screech of tearing metal, and the connection was finally broken. Silence reigned in the house again. Outside, very close to the locked door, a soft, shuffling sound was heard. Then a second. Someone walked slowly and heavily down the hall, dragging something along the floor behind them. They sat in the office, behind the barricade. 5 of them against an invisible horror. The boat was destroyed. Sergei was missing. There was no contact with the outside world. And the night was just beginning. Somewhere above, directly above their heads, a quiet, growing pounding sound could be heard. It sounded like someone methodically banging their head against the wall, over and over again. Chapter 3. Night of the Living Nightmares. The knocking above my head continued. Methodical, like the ticking of a broken clock, it gnawed at my consciousness, driving me to the point of madness. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. It seemed as if someone's mind, completely decomposed in this house, was trying to wring the last shreds of meaning from the wall. I can't listen to this anymore. Marina clapped her hands over her ears, her face contorted in despair. He'll drive us crazy. Nobody's going anywhere, Artyom muttered through clenched teeth. He stood by the barricade, his ear pressed to the crack between the door and the frame, listening to the sounds outside. The shuffling footsteps had died down, but that brought no relief. The silence was even more terrifying. Sergei made his own choice. He was chosen, you mean? Ivan's voice trembled with rage and helplessness. He checked his first aid kit again, mechanically sorting through the bandages and antiseptics. A ritual designed to maintain at least a shred of control. That voice, Dima's voice. It was a prank, a decoy. "They're not just walking corpses, Vanya," Lisa whispered. She sat, hugging her knees, staring into space. Her sketchbook lay open next to her. On the page was a sketched outline of a face with a huge, unnatural smile. Dr. Gross erased the personality, but not the memory. They remember. And they use it against us. They know where to strike. "What are we going to do?" Oleg jabbed aimlessly at the dead screen of his tablet. His usual humor had vanished, leaving only a frightened boy. "Sit here until they tear this door down? Wait for dawn?" "What if there's no dawn?" "Dawn will come," Artyom said with a confidence he didn't feel. His own mind was a war zone. The thought of Dima, the possibility that his body could be used in these experiments, stifled his breath. He was the leader. He had to get everyone out. Both then, 15 years ago, and now. "We'll hold out. In the morning we'll try to reach those barracks your drone saw. There might be something useful there. A boat, a radio." Outside, at the end of the hallway, a door slammed. Not a bang, but a crash, as if it had been ripped off its hinges. Everyone flinched, pressing themselves against the walls. The sound of breaking glass was heard. Someone's heavy, clumsy footsteps. And a quiet, intermittent squeal. Like a child crying. "Don't listen," Ivan said sharply. This is not a child, but it was too late. Marina, her eyes full of tears, had already stood up. "What if someone is alive?" Her voice broke. "It's not alive. Sit down," Artyom shouted at her. Suddenly the pounding above my head stopped. A new sound took its place, the creaking of floorboards. Someone large and heavy began slowly descending the stairs. Each step emitted a drawn-out, painful groan. The silence that followed the creak was deafening. They froze, not daring to move. The adrenaline crystallized in their blood, turning to ice. Oleg was the first to lose it. He crawled to the window, covered by a bookshelf, and carefully, just a centimeter, pulled it back. "There's no one," he exhaled. "It's dark." "Fine," Artyom muttered. "Keep your head down." But Oleg wasn't listening anymore. His gaze fell on something on the windowsill, behind the glass. Some white object. "Hey, what's this?" He stuck his hand through the crack and pulled out a small, soaking wet box. A cardboard box, once covered in silk. It was old, but clearly hadn't been outside long. "Don't touch!" Ivan tried to stop him, but Oleg had already opened the lid. Inside, on the wrinkled velvet lining, lay a small, time-worn photograph. It showed all of them. 6 of them. 15 years old. Artyom, Marina, Sergei, Liza, Ivan, Oleg, and Dima. They were standing on that very bank, smiling at the camera. Behind them was the river and the ominous silhouette of the Burakov. On the back of the photograph, in a crooked, hasty handwriting, was written, "We remember you. Come back to us. Always yours." Artyom's breath caught. This wasn't just a threat. It was a message. Personal. Targeted. They had been lured here. They were expected. How? Marina began, but her question hung in the air. At that moment, something heavy crashed against the window, right where the box had just been. The glass cracked like a web. A face stared back at them from the darkness. The same one Lisa had seen. Pale, swollen, with wet holes where eyes should have been, and that same eerie, ear-length smile. It was pressed against the glass, smearing dark slime across it. Oleg recoiled with a short cry. Lisa gasped and covered her face with her hands. The creature on the other side, slowly, pressing, drew a long, blackened fingernail across the glass. The scraping sound was nerve-wracking. It wasn't trying to break the glass. It simply looked and smiled. Then another face replaced it. A woman's, with long, tangled hair and empty eye sockets. It opened its mouth, and from its throat came not a scream, but a guttural, gurgling whisper that was audible even through the glass. Li for me la I. Lisa shuddered as if struck by an electric shock. She recognized that voice. It was the voice of her grandmother, who had died 3 years ago. It's not her, Ivan said quickly, grabbing her hand. Hold on, Lisa, it's a trap. They're in our heads, Artem whispered in horror. They're digging through our memories and pulling out the most painful parts. The creature with Grandma Lisa's voice pressed its forehead against the glass and froze, silently moving its lips, repeating the same word, which only Lisa could hear. Suddenly, a deafening bang came from the other side of the door, in the hallway. The barricade shook. Something huge and powerful was pounding on the massive oak door. They're breaking down the door, Oleg shouted. The blow was repeated. The wood splintered. The bolt, so secure just a moment ago, creaked under the force. Chaos engulfed the office. To the door, Artem yelled. Run to the door, all together. He lunged for the door to prop it open, but another blow sent him flying back. The door cracked along its entire length. The window, through the window, Marina pointed her finger at the cracked glass. What's there? Oleg screamed in panic. They're there too. At that moment, the door gave way. Its upper portion flew off, revealing a huge, blurry shadow in the opening. Not a person. Something in tattered robes, with an unnaturally bloated torso and arms dragging along the floor. Its face was hidden in shadow, but the same sweet corpse-like smell emanated from it, now much stronger. The creature slowly crossed the threshold, knocking aside a heavy chest of drawers with a bang. It was alone, but its presence filled the entire room. Ivan grabbed Lisa, who was half-conscious, and dragged her toward the stairs. Oleg, abandoning his tablet, rushed after them. Marina, who was closest to the window, froze in paralysis, staring at the monster. And then a sound came from his chest. Not from his throat, but from his sternum. A dull, cracked bass voice, the kind she'd heard thousands of times in her videos. Marina, a voice said. Her father's voice, the voice she loved so much. Daughter, why did you abandon us? Why did you go away and leave me alone to die? Marina's legs gave way. She fell to her knees, sobs tearing through her chest. Dad, Marina, no, it's not him, Artem screamed, but it was too late. The creature took a step toward her. Its huge, swollen hand slowly reached toward her face. Not aggressively, with an eerie, almost tender caress. It's all right, daughter, A voice gurgled from the monster's chest. "It's all over. Come to me." Artyom looked back. Ivan and Oleg were already dragging Lisa upstairs. He was alone, and he saw a hand with long, curved nails almost touching Marina's hair. "I will not leave anyone behind," flashed through his head. With a cry of rage and fear, he snatched a heavy bronze inkwell from the table and hurled it at the creature with all his might. It hit him in the side with a dull thud, like a sack of wet earth. The creature slowly, very slowly, turned its faceless head toward him. The voice from its chest changed. Now it was a chilling, hate-filled roar. "Artyom," it hissed. "Coward. You abandoned me in the river back then. You abandoned me and saved your own skin." It was Dima's voice, adult, distorted by pain and anger. Artyom was stunned. All these years he'd been suppressing his guilt, making excuses, burying it deep. And now it stood before him in the flesh, breathing the stench of the grave upon him. At that moment, Marina, taking advantage of the pause, came to her senses. She screamed, rolled backwards, and hit her back against the wall. The path to the stairs was blocked. "Run!" Artyom shouted at her, retreating and grabbing a heavy chair leg that had been broken off during the barricade. "Upstairs!" The creature, ignoring him, took another step toward Marina. It was interested in easier prey, someone psychologically broken. With a wild cry, Artyom lunged forward and slammed his improvised club into the creature's back. There was a sickening crunch. The creature merely swayed, but didn't stop. His hand shot forward and grabbed Marina by the shoulder. There was the sound of tearing fabric and a wet, squelching sound. Claws sank into flesh. Marina screamed, not from fear but from inhuman pain. Artyom swung again, but suddenly other shadows poured through the doorway from the corridor. Smaller, more agile. They followed the sound, the smell of fear and blood. He realized this was the end. If he didn't leave now, they would all die. "I'm sorry," he whispered, meeting Marina's eyes, filled with horror. The last thing he saw before he turned and ran up the stairs was three pale, emaciated creatures with empty looks attacking Marina, while the creature with Dima's voice stood over her, silently laughing. His scream, full of agony, covered Artyom as he ran up the steps, saving his skin, just like he had once upon a time, on that very river. Chapter 4. Heart of Darkness. Artyom flew up to the second floor, tripping over a broken vase and a pile of rags. His heart was pounding as if it were trying to burst from his chest. Marina's screams from below pierced him like hot knives. They quickly gave way to gurgling, choking sounds, and then ceased altogether. Silence reigned, broken only by the heavy, hoarse howl of that creature with Dima's voice. "Artyom, over here!" Ivan stood in the doorway at the end of the hallway, waving a flashlight. His face was deathly pale. Lisa stood next to him, leaning against the wall, Oleg's arm around her shoulder. They both looked at Artyom with horror and silent questioning. He ran up to them, and Ivan immediately slammed the door. It was a bedroom, slightly smaller than the study downstairs. Oleg immediately set to work, propping the door open with the headboard. "Marina," Lisa breathed out, looking at Artyom. Tears welled up in her eyes. Artyom just shook his head, unable to speak. He felt empty, a traitor, a leader who had once again failed to save his comrade. Dima's voice still echoed in his head. "Coward. You abandoned me in the river back then." "She's not here," Ivan said hoarsely, answering Lisa and Oleg's silent question. They took her. Oleg collapsed to the floor, hiding his face in his knees. God. Marina. What was that, Artyom? Ivan stared at him. It spoke to you. In Dima's voice. It speaks to what we fear most, Artyom whispered, turning away. He couldn't look them in the eye. It pulls out our most painful memories and uses them as weapons. Marina heard her father's voice. He fell silent. I heard Grandma, Lisa said quietly. She was calling me. They sat in the darkness, listening to the sounds outside. The house was silent, but the silence was deceptive. They knew the creatures hadn't gone anywhere. They were waiting. They were wearing them out. We can't stay here, Ivan was the first to break the silence. They'll find us. They already know how to pressure us. Our psyches won't be able to handle it. Where should we go? Oleg asked defiantly. They're below. They're outside. We're trapped. We're not going down, Artyom said firmly, finally raising his head. A familiar light lit in his eyes, the light of despair turning to determination. But there's another way. The basement. Everyone stared at him. A basement? Ivan asked. How do you know? I saw it when we were running upstairs. Next to the stairs, in the hall, there's another door. Small, iron. It must lead underground. What could it be? Another collection of Dr. Gross's friends? Oleg snorted sarcastically. Possibly. Or maybe a generator, an old weapon, or an exit. Perhaps there was another entrance, on the side where the barracks were. Dr. Gross wouldn't have dragged bodies through the front door. The idea was insane, but there was no other. Sitting around and waiting for the next psychological attack meant going crazy or getting killed. Okay, Ivan sighed. Let's say we decide. How are we going to get through the hall? It's full of them. We won't go through the hall, Artyom said, walking to the room's only window and looking out. The night was moonless, but the starlight and the reflections of their lanterns highlighted the massive, carved cornice elements and drain pipes. We'll go along the wall. We'll drop down here from the balcony or the roof and enter that door from the outside. Oleg chuckled skeptically. Excellent plan, Tarzan, but I'm not a monkey to climb walls. We have no choice, Artyom cut him off sharply. Either we try or we stay here and die. I choose to try. The plan was borderline suicidal. They climbed from the bedroom into the attic through a hatch in the hallway ceiling. From there, through a dormer window, they managed to crawl out onto the steep, slippery roof. The wind swirling high above was icy and piercing. Crawling along the rotting roof, clinging to brackets and pipes, was pure torture. Every rustle, every creak underfoot seemed treacherous. Lisa walked without looking up, her lips silently whispering a prayer or a spell. Oleg cursed through clenched teeth. Ivan and Artyom silently made their way. Descending down a thick drain pipe, rotted in several places, was the next challenge. When Oleg, the last one down, was already a meter from the ground, the bracket holding the pipe first creaked treacherously, then tore away from the wall with a crash. Oleg fell screaming into a thicket of thorny bushes, but fortunately escaped with only bruises and scratches. They stood by the wall of the house in a narrow space between it and the beginnings of the forest. The air here was even heavier, saturated with the smell of damp earth and decay. The door, Artem pointed with the flashlight. There, in a deep niche almost hidden by ivy, was that very iron door. It was massive, covered in a thick layer of rust, but it looked sturdy. And most importantly, it had a modern barn lock on it. New, shiny, a stark contrast to the old metal. Someone used this entrance, Ivan stated. And recently. Maybe they? Lisa asked fearfully. Zombies don't use locks. Artem shook his head. They don't need to. It has another owner. Oleg, dusting himself off, took out his set of lockpicks. Well, buddy, it's your turn again. This time the job took in longer. The lock was complex, but after a few tense minutes a click was heard. Oleg pulled the heavy door toward him with effort. It opened with a low, grinding sound. The smell hit them in the face, the same one they'd smelled in the house, but here, in the dungeon, it was far more concentrated. The smell of chemicals, formalin, decay, and something else, something indescribable, metallic, electrical. Turning on all the lights, they carefully stepped inside. This wasn't just a storage room or a cellar. It was a laboratory. The room was spacious and elongated. Massive wooden tables lined the walls, filled with flasks, retorts, and antique microscopes. Unidentified organic samples floated in murky liquid in glass jars on the shelves. But the most terrifying thing lay in the center. A row of metal cots, similar to hospital beds but with leather straps to secure the limbs. On one of them lay the decayed remains of a uniform, strapped in place. On the floor beneath it lay a dark stain ingrained into the concrete. And at the far end of the room stood an object that made their blood run cold. A large apparatus resembling a generator or transformer, assembled from lamps, wires, and copper coils. Wires ran from it to strange metal helmets scattered on the floor. The apparatus was old but clearly functional. Several lamps on its panel flickered dimly red, and a barely audible hum emanated from it. "Oh my God," Ivan whispered. So he really was a scientist. A mad one. Artyom approached one of the desks. Among the junk he found a thick, leather-bound volume. Dr. Gross's diary. It was much fuller than the folder they'd found in the office. Artyom opened it to the first page he came across. January 12, 1953. Breakthrough. Prometheus 5 is stable. Subject 12 not only retained motor function, but also exhibited residual electrical activity in the cerebral cortex. I was able to read fragments of visual memories. Fear, pain, rage. These are not just reflexes. This is a cocktail of base emotions, freed from the oppression of personality. I do not create corpses. I create perfect soldiers. A weapon that hates, that remembers only the pain inflicted upon it, and thirsts for retribution. And this weapon can be aimed using resonance. They will hunt those whose emotional field resonates with their own pain. Resonance, Artem read aloud. They hunt by resonance. Our pain, our fear, our guilt. It's like a beacon for them. So Sergei, his pain over Dima was the worst, Lisa said. That's why they took him first. And Marina felt guilty for her father, Ivan added. At that moment, Oleg, who was examining the strange device, shouted, "Hey, look what I found!" He picked up a small black object from the floor. It was the lens from his drone's camera. It was covered in cracks and dark stains. He was here. They dragged him here. Lisa, her gaze wandering over the shelves of samples, suddenly cried out and recoiled, pointing to one of the large glass flasks. Inside, floating in a murky solution, was something resembling a human brain. But not quite. It seemed to be threaded with thin, silvery threads that pulsed in time with the flickering lights on the apparatus. He didn't just animate the bodies, Ivan whispered in horror, stepping closer. He somehow modified their nervous systems, created some kind of network, a collective mind based on pain. Suddenly, the machine's hum intensified. The lights flickered faster and brighter. A familiar hissing sound emanated from the speaker on its panel, followed by a voice, distorted, mechanical, but recognizable. Artem, Ivan, Lisa, Oleg. It was Marina's voice, but devoid of any emotion. You are here. We feel you. Your pain is so delicious. Don't hide. Become part of the whole. From a dark opening in the depths of the laboratory, behind the apparatus, came a rustling sound. Multiple, merging into a single, unpleasant hum. Pale, emaciated figures slowly emerged from the darkness into the light of their flashlights. There were at least 10 of them. They filled the passage, cutting off any escape route, and in front of them all stood that same large creature. It was silent, but its blurry silhouette exuded such hatred that it could be physically felt. The apparatus roared behind them. The lamps flashed a blinding white light, and the air smelled of ozone. They were trapped in the very heart of Dr. Gross's nightmare. And this time, there seemed to be no escape at all. Chapter 5. Prometheus Bound. There was nowhere to run. The iron door behind them was the only exit, and it was firmly blocked by a wall of bodies. Pale, disfigured faces, empty eye sockets, hands with long, curved nails, all of them slowly but inexorably tightened the noose. The hollow, dead sound coming from the apparatus echoed off the stone walls of the basement. Your pain is so delicious. Get away from the device, Ivan commanded, grabbing a heavy glass flask from the table. It's somehow amplifying them. Without thinking, Artyom threw a metal basin at the creatures. The blow caught one of them in the chest, but it merely swayed, silent. They felt no pain. They were pain. Oleg, the door, Artyom shouted. Try closing it from the inside again. Maybe there's a deadbolt. But Oleg didn't move. He stood, staring at one of the figures in the front row. It was a short, frail woman in the tatters of a sarafan. Her face was less damaged than the others, and it was frozen in an expression of deep, all-consuming sadness. "Mom," Oleg whispered. His face turned completely white. "This is impossible." "Oleg, no, it's not her." Lisa tried to get through to him, but it was too late. The creature woman extended her hand toward him. What came from her throat was not a whisper, but a quiet, heart-rending cry. The same cry Oleg had heard as a child when his mother mourned his dead father. She's suffering," Oleg muttered, taking a step forward. I have to help her. I had to protect her. Oleg, stop, Ivan barked, but Oleg, as if in a trance, was already walking towards the ghost of his greatest grief. At that moment, the largest creature, the one in the house, made a low, growling sound. Its voice was Dima's again, but now it sounded less like an accusation and more like a command. Leave him. He's already ours. The creatures parted, letting Oleg pass. He walked between them, never taking his eyes off the crying woman, and disappeared into the darkness of the passage from which they had emerged. A moment later, his cry, short, broken, pierced the air, and just as suddenly died away. There are 3 of them left. The lab was once again plunged into silence, broken only by the hum of the apparatus and Lisa's quiet sobs. Artyom and Ivan stood back to back, clutching iron rods they'd picked up from the floor in their sweaty palms. The creatures didn't attack. They simply stood there, blocking the exit, watching. "What do you want?" Artyom shouted, his voice breaking on a high note. "What do you want from us?" The large creature stepped forward. It was enormous, its shoulders almost touching the doorframe. The lantern light revealed details. The robe wasn't just any robe. It was a camp guard's uniform, albeit torn and stained. And around its pale, swollen neck, a whistle dangled from a rusty chain. "We want peace." Marina's voice came through the device again. "But there is none. There is only hunger. Only you can satisfy it. Your guilt. Your pain. This is food. Give it to us." "We won't give you anything," Ivan said through clenched teeth. "You're a mistake, and all mistakes must be corrected." He looked at Artyom, then at the flashing device. The idea was crazy, but there was no other. "Artyom, the device! It's their source, their antenna. If we destroy it, we can break the connection," Artyom finished his thought. "Or piss them off even more. The alternative is to become lunch," Ivan shouted. "Cover me." With a cry that was a mixture of rage and despair, Ivan rushed forward toward the creatures, swinging an iron rod. His attack was so unexpected and furious that the first 2 creatures recoiled, giving him a small opening. "Liza, come with me," Artyom commanded, grabbing her hand and dragging her toward the device. The large creature rushed at Ivan with a roar. He managed to raise a rod to defend himself, but the powerful blow sent him flying across the room. He crashed into the table with the flasks, and the glass shattered onto the floor with a clatter. Artyom, meanwhile, had reached the apparatus. He raised his rod to bring it down on the fragile-looking lamps and tubes. "Artyom." The voice from the speaker changed again. Now it was his own voice, but full of childish terror. "Don't! Dad, don't!" A ghost appeared before him. Not in the room, but in his mind. He was the little boy again, who had accidentally broken his father's collectible model car. He saw his angry face, heard his scream, and he felt that same all-consuming guilt. His hand trembled. The rod froze in midair. "Artyom, what are you doing?" Lisa screamed. She saw him freeze, his eyes glassy. "This isn't real." But Artyom didn't hear her. He was trapped in his past. Liza saw the creatures, taking advantage of the pause, begin to converge again. Ivan lay motionless among the shards of glass. The solution came to her instantly, born not of logic, but of the very gift that had always made her special, the ability to feel the pain of others. She closed her eyes, and instead of pushing the pain away, as everyone had advised all these years, she let it in. She allowed all her fears, all her guilt, for the fight with her mother before she left, for not being able to help Sergei, for Marina's death, to burst forth. She imagined it as a dark, seething river, and then she directed it, not at the creatures, at the machine. She didn't know how it worked. Perhaps Gross's apparatus was tuned to detect precisely these kinds of emotions. Perhaps her empathy was the very resonance the madman had written about. The device roared. The lights flickered wildly, overheating. A cacophony of voices poured out of the speaker. Dima, Marina, Oleg. Oleg's mother's cries. Grandma Lisa's voice, all merging into one deafening screech. The creatures froze in uncertainty. Their connection to the station was distorted by a powerful, uncontrollable surge of alien suffering. Artyom, freed from the nightmare, gasped and swung the rod at the apparatus. There was a crunching sound of glass and a crackling of electricity. Sparks flew in all directions, one landing directly in a puddle of alcohol from the broken flasks. A flame erupted. A small blue one that instantly spread across the wooden tables, devouring Dr. Gross's papers. "Liza!" Artyom shouted, grabbing her. She was on her knees, exhausted, blood pouring from her nose. The fire quickly gained strength. Smoke filled the basement. The creatures, lacking clear direction, began to thrash about. Some rushed to extinguish the flames. Others, roaring, rushed at Artyom and Lisa. At that moment, Ivan rose from the other side of the room. His face was bloodied, but his eyes blazed with determination. He grabbed one of the metal helmets lying on the floor and threw it with all his might at the large creature. The helmet hit him in the head. The creature growled and turned towards him. That was the second Artyom needed. Dragging Lisa along with him, he lunged for the iron door. The creatures standing there were distracted by the fire and Ivan. Artyom shoulder-barreled one of them, sending it flying, and pushed Lisa out into the cold night. "Vanya!" he shouted, turning around. Ivan stood with his back to the burning tables, facing the large creature and the other beasts. He raised his bloodied face and his gaze met Artyom's. There was no fear in his eyes. There was acceptance. "Run!" he shouted. "Get out of here and take care of Lisa!" He turned and, with a scream, rushed at the large creature, wrapping his arms around it and pushing it deeper into the burning laboratory. Flames were already consuming the monster's robe. A terrifying, inhuman roar rang out. Artyom didn't see what happened next. He slammed the iron door shut and, grabbing the exhausted Lisa, ran away from the burning house, toward the forest where the barracks had once been. He ran without looking back, even though he could hear screams, roars, and the crackling of fire coming from behind the door. He ran, feeling tears streaming down his cheeks, tears of loss, guilt, and rage. He was the last, the leader who had lost everyone again. But this time, He had to save at least one. He had to survive. To tell, to warn, or to die trying. Chapter 6. The Final Countdown. Artyom ran, his legs numb. He dragged Lisa's almost limp body, her feet dragging along the ground. The air was thick and acrid with smoke, but it was sweet compared to the stench of the basement. From behind, came the sounds of the apocalypse. The crackling of the house being consumed by fire, the rumble of collapsing beams, and screams, inhuman, full of rage and agony. He didn't look back. To look back would be to see the hell he'd left behind. To look back would be to see charred but still moving figures emerging from the fire. He ran toward the dark, low silhouettes of the barracks visible at the edge of the forest. This was their last, desperate hope. He burst into the doorway of the first barracks, knocking the rotted door off its hinges and collapsing to the floor with Lisa. Dust rose in a column in the moonlight filtering through the cracks in the roof. He lay there, gasping for air, listening to the frantic pounding of his own heart. Lisa moaned softly. A few minutes later, he found the strength to rise. The barracks was empty. A long room with 2 rows of bunks covered with rotted rags. Nothing useful. No boat, no radio. Only dust, cobwebs, and the ghosts of tortured people. He crawled outside. The house was ablaze like a giant torch, illuminating the surroundings with an ominous orange glow. The flames danced on the tree trunks, making them look like giants frozen in terror. No one was pursuing them. The fire seemed to have done its job, either destroying the creatures or distracting them. He returned to Lisa, found a nearly empty bottle of water in his backpack, and began to give her some. She came to, her eyes hollow and bottomless. Everyone died?" she whispered. Artyom only nodded, unable to utter a word. I felt them," she continued, staring into space. At the end, when the machine exploded, it wasn't just pain, it was an eternity of suffering. They didn't mean any harm, they just couldn't stop suffering. Dr. Gross, he chained them to their own agony, forever. "He's dead," Artyom said hoarsely. "And his creations too. It's all over." "It's over?" Lisa smiled weakly. "Do you really think so?" They sat in the barracks until dawn, without a wink of sleep. With the first rays of the sun, the fire began to die down. All that remained of the house was a charred hulk, smoking against the brightening sky. With renewed vigor, they began searching the barracks. In one, they found a storage area with old tools. In another, the remains of a first aid kit and several cans of stewed meat with Soviet labels. It was a victory. A tiny one, but a victory nonetheless. It was in the farthest barracks, the one deep in the forest, that their final discovery awaited them, and their final mystery. It wasn't a living space, but something like an office or a guardhouse. On the table lay a map of the island, an old, yellowed one. Tiki Island, site diagram number 734-B. And on it, at the northernmost point of the island, beyond Oleg's reach, was a lighthouse. Next to it was a note. Emergency command post, radio station, food reserve. A lighthouse, Artyom breathed out. There could be a radio there. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. In the desk, In a locked drawer that Artem had forced open with a crowbar lay a folder marked Top Secret. And inside it were contemporary documents, reports, photographs. A photograph of themselves taken at the pier on the day of their departure. And the last document, dated last month. Report on observation of the Burakov anomalous zone. Signed by a certain FSB colonel. Artem frantically ran his eyes over the text. The anomaly's activity remains at the same level. Psi emission generated by residual effects from the Prometheus experiment has a destructive effect on the psyche at a distance of up to 5 kilometers, confirming the hypothesis of a collective nature of the phenomenon. Attempts to physically destroy the object in 1988 and 2005 were unsuccessful. The island remains under quarantine. Any entry by civilians is considered an irreparable loss. Recommendation: maintain the isolation regime. Spread disinformation about a geological ban on visiting the island. Artyom threw the folder away as if he'd been electrocuted. His world had completely collapsed. "They knew," he whispered. "They knew everything. They knew we were here. They knew what would happen to us. We're an irreparable loss to them." Statistics. Lisa silently picked up one of the photographs. It showed their camp on the shore, 2 days before the fateful rafting trip. Someone had been watching them from the very beginning. "They didn't save us because they had no intention of saving us," she said without emotion. "This island is a laboratory cage, and we are guinea pigs who climbed into it themselves." A black and all-consuming rage rose within Artyom. He was more than just a victim of a monster. He was a pawn in someone else's inhuman game. His friends had died not because of cruel fate, but because of the indifference of some colonel from Moscow. "The lighthouse," he said, his voice turning metallic. "We're going to the lighthouse. If there's a radio there, we won't broadcast a call for help. We'll expose everything. Their reports, their photographs, all that dirt. Let the whole world know what's going on here." The journey to the lighthouse took several hours. They walked in silence, bearing the weight of the terrible truth. The island seemed deserted. Not a sound, not a movement, as if the fire had truly cleansed the place. The lighthouse was old, concrete, about 20 meters tall. The door to the base was welded shut, but a rusty hatch on the side wall gave way after a few blows with a crowbar. Inside, it smelled of mold and oil. A spiral staircase led upstairs. On the ground floor, there was a room with a mothballed diesel generator and boxes of stewed meat and crackers. And, miracle, an Angstrom R shortwave radio station, which looked operational. Artyom rushed to her. He wasn't an expert, but he knew the basic principles. He turned on the power. The lamps glowed hot. The air was clear. "Call sign for everyone who can hear. Call sign for everyone. We're on Tiki Island. There are 4 of us." He corrected himself. "There are 2 of us. The rest are dead." This is Artem Kruglov speaking. He spoke for 10 minutes, going into horrific detail, naming names, citing reports. He wasn't asking for their lives to be saved. He was demanding justice. He was broadcasting all the pain and rage that had been building within him for all these years. When he finished, he lowered the microphone. The silence in the room was deafening. "Do you think this will work?" Lisa asked. She stood by the narrow window, looking out at the sea. "I don't know, but we did what we could." Suddenly she shuddered. "Artem, look." He walked to the window. A figure stood on the shore at the water's edge, tall, thin. It was Sergei. His clothes were covered in dirt and blood, but he stood. He looked at the lighthouse, and he was smiling. That same simple human smile that was characteristic of him in rare moments of happiness. And then he raised his hand, not threateningly. He was saying goodbye. And then slowly, without turning around, he walked into the water. He took a few steps and disappeared under the waves. "He's free," Lisa whispered. "The fire destroyed the connection. They're all free." Artyom didn't answer. He stared at the empty expanse of water, and something inside him twisted. Anger gave way to emptiness, and to a bitter, joyless relief. Epilogue: Quiet Island. They were found 12 hours later. The helicopter landed on a narrow strip of shore. Men in unmarked military uniforms emerged. They were polite but cold. They were picked up, taken to a secret hospital, and interrogated for a week. Then they were released, after signing a non-disclosure agreement. The story of the tragic rafting accident made the news. Marina, Ivan, Oleg, and Sergei were buried. Artem and Lisa tried to stick together, but they were only connected by a shared trauma too terrible to talk about. Soon they dispersed to different cities trying to forget. A year passed. Artyom was sitting in his apartment, far from any river, watching the evening news. The news was about something insignificant. But at the end, in the funny stories section, a short clip was shown. Fishermen on a Siberian river had captured a strange phenomenon. A flock of birds suddenly, all at once, plummeted into the water. A few seconds later, they took off just as quickly, as if nothing had happened. The anchor joked about magnetic storms, but Artyom noticed something else. In the background, in the haze, a familiar silhouette loomed. The island, Burakov. And at its peak, where the lighthouse had once stood, a single, barely visible light glowed. It wasn't electric. It was greenish, shimmering, as if glowing from within. Like that very liquid in Dr. Gross's flasks. Artyom slowly turned off the television. Silence fell over the apartment. He walked to the window, looking out at the lights of the large, indifferent city. They survived. They told their story. But the island didn't die. It merely lay dormant. And, perhaps, awaited new guests. And somewhere in the silence of his own apartment, Artyom thought he heard a soft, damp sound, almost imperceptible, like shuffling footsteps on wet sand.